Hello, I'm Mark, and welcome to my channel. In this Unreal Engine tutorials video, we will be doing a small primer covering the basics of creating a developer settings class for your Unreal Engine plugins and games. So, what is a developer settings class, you might ask yourself? Well, if you've been working in Unreal Engine for a while and if you've been following tutorials online, usually a lot of people bring you to this project settings, right? And this project settings screen is where you can tweak settings, default, or the default settings of various parts of the project, the game, the engine, the editor, any Unreal Engine out-of-the-box plugins. This is where you can come and make those tweaks so that you can either tweak the performance of the engine, set up your game so for default maps and within the editor or within the game, right? So it's default start points, supported platforms. This is where you can come when you're getting ready to pack your games, target hardware, same thing. If you needed to do anything, so desktop, mobile. So if you picked desktop for development, but you want to then you changed your mind, you don't have to scrap the project. You can come here, targeted hardware, and say no, optimize for mobile instead. Versus maximum and scalability, it's up to you. Again, as far as games, you've got asset tools and widget settings, as well as the Zen streamer. Engine, these are all the things that you can, again, that are built into the engine out of the box, where you can then come, and if you need to make a change or you want to move, you want to change the default settings, you can. So the old input system, we don't use this anymore, but it's still here for legacy as it's continuing to be phased out. But then you've also got things like the old physics, my favorite place in the world to be right now. And this is where you can come in to tweak these engine settings. Also, you've got editor settings. So if you're working on specific editor functionality and you wanted to change something, so you've got the 2D paper importer. If you needed to say I wanted to use some change the defaults for what you're working on, you can come in here in the project, and this is as on a project base, right? And then as well as platforms, if you need to compile and you need to make some specific tweaks to that, you can come here. Game splash screen, editor splash screen, these little things. And then, as we all know, Unreal Engine's got a whole host of plugins that come out of the box, but you can also get plugins online. Again, they all have, a lot of them have, again, default settings which you can tweak, and some of these settings are specific for the editor, some of them are specific for gameplay. Again, you can see here Paper 2D. There seems to be there's a plugin for that, and there's some additional things that you can turn on or off, and they can be as small as just having like three little switches to something like, say, we'll come back up to the physics, and you can see that we've got drop downs, but floats. You can have all kinds of stuff. Even assets, right, that you can select. So, and it's the same with the plugins. So as you can see here, this is the Niagara plugin. So there's a lot of things here which come out of the box, but Unreal Engine gives you the ability to change some of the defaults at the global level here, and those defaults will then filter down into all of the things that support for the Niagara system. And so what we'll be doing in this video is showing you how you can create your own plugin or your own, I should say, settings class. And this can be for either a game where you might need to have a whole bunch of defaults, but you might, as you're kind of developing your game, you might want to tweak those defaults. Sometimes it's just good to go, put them in a global place like this. That way anyone can go in, tweak it, and especially when you're getting into a platform optimization or game optimization, you can put them here. And then if you're building plugins, it's the same thing. So we'll just create a little demo settings, kind of showing you, giving you a taste of what you can do and how you set that up, how to set it up, the things that you can put in there, like booleans, config values, as well as assets. So I'm just going to go ahead and just do an out of the box static mesh here, but also classes as well. You can also have it so if there's a default class that your game is using, but you might, especially for a plugin, right? But you might want to say, well, this class can be overridden without having to change everything in the plugin, which will give you the ability to kind of change, update or customize the gameplay or the logic within certain classes, right? You could do that here. So, and that could be it could be through a blueprint or an overridden class. So we'll get into this, and then once we've set this up, we'll go ahead and show you how you can then access that information here in the demo settings. So and it's relatively straightforward once you've got the demo class set up. So we'll take care of all that end to end, and then we'll come in and show you how you can access this, and we'll do a couple little tests in a default class, actor class, so that we can kind of see that data coming out of the settings and into that. So again, a lot of good stuff. So as always, we have a lot of ground to cover today, so let's get started. Okay, so for this tutorial, you're going to want to come to games, and if you don't already have a project that you want to work on, I'm just going to come into new projects, go into games, pick your poison. Just make sure that whenever you pick something, make sure that we're going to be using C++. So again, this tutorial is C++ only, and settings seem to be, you can only really do a settings class in C++ from what I can tell. So again, I'm going to be building out third person. If you want to do first person, or if you have your own project that you're kind of currently working on and you want to put a settings class in there directly, you can. Just make sure that project is a C++ project. Target platform desktop. I'm just using desktop and maximum, but again, pick your poison. Give it a name, hit create, and once that is done, you should have a project like this, or some kind of a project, whichever template you decide to pick. Once that's done, I'm just going to come down to C++ classes. As you can see here, I'm kind of piggybacking off my last video, which was the replication video. So I'm just going to add it into here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and let's go ahead and see if we can... Oh, I know what we'll do. So we're going to go ahead and create a new class, and I'm going to put it parallel so I don't actually put it into the stuff that I'm using for the replication. So as you can see here, I've got public replication. I'll probably give it another folder down for this. So let's go to new classes. So in order to do a settings class, when we bring up the add class wizard, and we need to come to all classes, and we're just going to say developer settings. And there it is. So as you can see, there's a hierarchical tree. We're just going to come up to the top, which is just going to give us the base, the basic developer settings class. And we're going to hit next. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it in its own folder. We'll call it settings. So we'll just put it there, and we'll give it a name. So I'm just going to call this demo developer settings. I think that's good enough. And then we're going to hit create class. And that's going to go ahead and create a class. If you're using Visual Studio, it'll go ahead and open up Visual Studio to create that class for us within Visual Studio. And once all of this is done and compiled, I'll bring over Visual Studio and we can see what it's given us out of the box. So here's the first compile of the day. So it's a little bit slow on my machine. All right, looks like we're almost there. All right, we have a good compile. For this, I've turned off live coding. It's just something that I just find is just annoying when I'm working in Unreal Engine. You know, I'm really not a big fan of its hot patching, because usually if you're building something and then you close the edit, if you've got this on and you close the editor and you come back, you're like, well, where did all my work go? Can be a little bit problematic. So let's bring Visual Studio over and let's see what we got. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the replication stuff since we're on developer settings. So out of the box, it's pretty bare bones. You know, we've got developer settings, we've got an H file and a CCP file. So let's go ahead and set this up. And in doing so, what I'll do is I'll probably bring back the other project so I can kind of show you, yeah, as we kind of set up some of the cosmetic stuff, how that lines up with what we've got. So just give me a second and I'll bring up the other project in the other window. And let's go ahead and just let's boost this up a little bit for you guys. All right, so as you can see, we've got a class. We've got the API, we've got developer settings, so it's deriving off the developer settings. This is our demo. So let's go ahead and set this up. So I'm going to start off with creating some zones. So here I'm going to create a protected zone. And a public. All right, so all my public facing code is going to be below here. All my protected code is going to be there. Anything else is going to be private. All right, then I need to go ahead and change this class here. So as you can see, so when working with developer settings, you're going to want to add config equals engine. This is default config, and then if you want a display name, which is this is the display name of the actual settings. So this is the demo configuration runtime. And so let me go ahead and bring up the other project, and that will map to this down here, which is the link. So whatever you put, let's go back to C++. Here, that's going to be the name of the link, right? And so then we're going to want to, but then we also want to put it into, yeah, you might want to put this into a custom category so you know exactly where it is. So your stuff doesn't get commingled, or maybe you want to commingle it with the Unreal Engine. So to do that, what we need to do is we're going to go and do a couple, I'm going to do a couple of things here. First off, under public, I'm going to do a couple of things. We're going to put this virtual override of the category name. So this is the category name, and that is going to allow us to customize this demo systems here, right? So I've got demo systems, and under there I've got demo configuration runtime. So demo configuration runtime, that is the class display name. Demo systems is the category. So I'm gonna just move that down, and we're also gonna need a constructor for a little bit later. So I'll just put a default constructor there. So this is the default constructor. I'm going to use this so that I can, because there's some things that we're going to do for preloading into our settings. For data, these are our properties. So I'm going to put this into protected. And as you can see here, I've got this little demo pawn. So let's go ahead and create that little demo class as well while we're here. I'm just going to comment that out for compile reasons, and then we'll light it up. But this information here is going to line up with the settings. If I bring back project settings, that's going to line up with all of these properties here. So these are all properties, all right, and so we want to set these all up so we can then change them. So these are our defaults. Just close that and minimize that. And as you can see here, we're there, edit anywhere. We're using config. Again, you want to use this tag, and then category, you can give it whatever category. You can give it a category of config, which is probably doing the same thing here. Or you can give it separate categories if you needed to give them separate categories. Like here's a mesh, this is config, and then you've got, you know, vehicle, you know, player vehicle or whatever you want to call it down here. So, all right. So before we move on, tell you what, I'm just going to comment that out real quick for, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and create this demo pawn so that we can just, you know, play around with this a little bit. So I'm just going to save that. I'm going to just run build solution from here real quick. So I'll make sure that when I go and, all right, succeeded. I'm going to come to content drawer. All right, so that little extra class, I'm just going to come down here, go to public. I suppose I can put it right here since it has nothing to do with settings. Create a new class. I'm just going to create a default pawn class there and hit that. We'll call it we'll just call it demo pawn. And everything else lines up. Still public folder. It's going to go into the root, so I'm going to hit. Tell you what. We'll put it there. Create class. So again, Unreal Engine's doing its thing in the background, and it's. I'm just going to go reload it, so it puts it into the tree. Just going to close all these all this build stuff, but I'm going to open up the source because we do need to do a couple of things in the source as we can, in order to kind of get this thing to show up. So there's our demo class. I'm not going to do anything special with this yet, so we just created it. Let's come back to settings. Some things we need to do, again, when we're kind of working with C++, is we're going to need to come into our build. And we're going to need to add a couple of things. Let me just check. Okay, so just something to add to the build. So this is under the build.cs. So this is everything in Unreal Engine is modular. So what we want to do is we want to add, I'm just going to go ahead and add it here. So these are some private dependencies that we're just going to add, and that's going to be the developer settings and projects. So whenever working with developer settings, you're going to need to add this. It may compile without it, but you could see some weirdness. So usually, or sometimes, depending on if you're working in plugins, it'll certainly have some issues with it. So when setting up your settings, you just need to add some private dependencies, and that is just going to be your developer settings, which is the developer settings module, and then your projects as well. So I'm just going to close that, and we'll come back to developer settings. Now that we've got our demo here, I can go ahead and set this up. And for this, I'm just going to put a pre-compiler definition here, so that way I don't have to put an include or have any circular logic. So we'll just do that. So we're just going to put the class up there. That's the class name. Let's go back to our public pawns, demo pawn. Yeah, should be the same name. Just double check that. All right. So again, this is our default runtime for a vehicle, player vehicle or player. We can put that there. And again, if you've got any defaults, there's different ways you could do this. I'm just putting this here, but because we've got a constructor, we'll actually go ahead and set the defaults in the constructor. We can also set the defaults in the constructor too. All right, so now I'm just going to undo that, and let's start putting in the defaults as well as our category name. So, okay, so let's just see if Unreal Engine, we can fix this. Demo developer settings, so far so good. And category name. So these are the first two things we'll work on. So for category name, we'll do this first since this is real easy. All we're doing is we're just overriding the defaults, and we're going to tell it to just turn back and give us an F name. So this is the label. So that will line up with the category. In which, so if you're building a suite of plugins, and you could then brand, this is where you could brand that category, and then under there the display name would be what your plugin is actually. And Unreal Engine will then, when it creates that list in the editor, will go ahead and set that all up for us. All right, so now that we've got that done, let's go ahead and set up some defaults. So if I was to come back here, so as far as configuration toggle, config value, and config label, the defaults are set here. I'm just going to leave these here. But what I want to do is I want to set up a default static mesh asset. And to do that, if you want to set up defaults or pre-do it, you're going to need to use this tsoft object pointer. Usually we've been working with the T object pointer, and that is good if you're building things on the fly after, kind of like after the, without any kind of defaults or anything. But if you're using something that is going to be in the editor and you want to set it and compile it for the editor and have a default there ready to go, you'll want to use the tsoft object pointer instead of the T object pointer. And the reason why we want to do that is because we want to then allow us to point to an asset. So here we can then say, here's the static mesh asset, and we're going to use the fsoft object path. So this is how you can hard code specific paths to assets. And this will work for both anything in the settings, but also anything that you're kind of working from in your components as well. So that's the soft object path. And then all it is just taking a literal, location of where this is. So this plane object is in the engine basic shapes plane path. But if you wanted something which, say, like for the default pawn, and there's a couple of ways we can do that, and I will just bring them in and explain it real quick. So one option is you could just go ahead and say, if it's just a class, we could run this using the static class and put this into our T subclass object. So because we're using T subclass object, this allows us to pick which this gives us a class picker, right? That allows us to pick the actual class we want to use at runtime. So at compile time, it gives us the option, and then at runtime, it will then take that and create a physical copy of it. But if we want to actually pick a version, we'll want to then use the demo static. And this is where I'm going to need that include. And that should satisfy that. So if we just, so if this is, we just want the class, and again, we can also switch the class to a asset. But if our default is the class and then you want to override it with an asset, you can do that post. But if instead you wanted to use an asset out of the box, so it's a class, it could just be a regular pawn class, right? Or a actor class or a character class, and you want to say, no, use this class versus, you know, whatever's out of the box. You could also use, this is how you can set it up so you can use an asset like a blueprint instead of the actual physical class. So to do that, Unreal Engine has this constructor helpers, which is, and then there's a static kind of F-class finder on it. So you just pass in the base class, right? So we're going to be passing in a demo pawn, but if it was an actor, in just a generic actor, you could say a actor or a character, right? And then this is the variable that we want to put it into, right? And again, this is a struct. And then this is the location. So this is the location in my demo project, but this is not the location in the other project. So let's go ahead and fix that. So to do that, it's actually pretty simple. We can come down to classes, come in here, come to public, go to pawns, and then you can right click, and then you can say copy object path. So if I say copy object path, and then come back here and blow this up, I can then paste that object path in here. And then just put some quotes in here. And that is the path. Actually, no, whoops. Copy object path. No, we don't want that. Made a slight little mistake there. We need to come into the content tree, and let's go ahead and create that. So let's just create a folder. This is what we want. So I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to create a blueprint. There's our demo pawn. I'm going to hit select. Just come in here and let's just say just do that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and just say copy object path. That's the one I actually want, which is the blueprint. So there it is. Game, pawns, demo pawn, and that's the blueprint, and that's the asset. So that's what we want. So that's how you can appoint a blueprint asset in. So it's a little bit extra work. So if you know, but what this does is it will create this blueprint asset, and then if it's successful, i.e. it's gone down this path, if it's found a blueprint of this type, right, it'll say success. You know, it might not, it's not saying it's the blueprint that you want, but it's saying it's found this asset is of this type, so it's successful enough. And then in order to get that into our runtime class, we're just going to say blueprint asset dot class, and then that will actually get us the class that we need to satisfy that. So again, if you're working in blueprint assets, you'll need to do this. Otherwise, if not, you can do that, but then in the settings you can still select a blueprint after the fact, but your default would actually be a physical class still. All right, so now that we've got that done, let's keep going. So we have our data types, we've got our category name, and we've got our settings, but as you can see here, these are all protected, right? And so they should be. So we need to be able to access them when we call this class within any of our game code. So to do that, we just need to create some functions. All right, so here are our functions. So again, if we're bringing back an asset, you can just, we'll just bring it back by a pointer to the asset. Again, variables same way, and then this is if we need to bring back a subclass of, right, then we can pull it back this way. So let's go ahead and set all this up for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix these first. All right, so we don't need to worry about this, and we don't need to worry about that. So let's start looking at get surface. Oh, I'm calling this get surface water game mesh, but it could be whatever game mesh you're using. So for static mesh, all we have to really do is, I'm just going to copy this over. So what we want to do, this is the actual mesh, which is our T soft object pointer, and then on there is a function which is load synchronous. There's a couple which you could use. As you can see, there's a lot of little functions here. There's load asynchronous and load synchronous. Loading asynchronous is useful if you don't need to do anything on that asset at runtime. So what will it, so this is non-blocking. But this is blocking. So if you need to load in this asset and then you need to then do things on that asset after it's loaded, you want to use load synchronous. If you're just loading something in and, it's kind of like, I just want to load it in the background. I don't care because it's already going to, it will do whatever it needs to do on its own without any additional work on my behalf. You could use load asynchronous, but we're going to just load synchronous for this. So we're going to load it, wait for a good load, and then then if we wanted to then manipulate it after the fact, we could. For variables, it's pretty straightforward. As you can see, these are all constants. And again, these are all constants. Everything here is a constant because we do not want to then allow the game to revert any of these. These are considered defaults that we're getting. So that's our toggle. That's our value. And that's our label. All right. So now that we've got all that, there are some additional things that we need to add to this settings class so that it's considered it fits the Unreal Engine model. So, and these are some virtual overrides, and some of these are going to have some compiler functions or compiler variables added to them. So I'm just going to go copy them. So because this class is designed to work with the editor, there are certain things that are only editor specific. And one of those functions is going to be this post editor change property, right? And then you're going to see that we have this with editor and end if. So this is actually a variable. So when you compile a game for distribution, what it's going to do is it's going to set this variable to 0 instead of 1. And when it compiles, it will not include this function or this this delegate, right? These are specific things that are only used for within the context of the editor. And Unreal Engine has a lot of these actually on a lot of its C++ classes. So if you're kind of wanting to get into further and further into building, like say custom plugins or custom functionality, right? And you want it so that other people on the team which are working in Blueprints can make changes and it does an auto update based on the change they may make in the data that will have that will then need to recompile or reset things, right? That's what these kind of functions will do. I'll probably get into these in a little bit more detail in the future videos as I start kind of diving more and more into it. But for this video, we'll kind of show it. But it is very, I wanted to bring your attention to this because we'll be using this, or even if we're not using this, right? we definitely need to keep track of what functions are within this macro. Okay, because like I said, if it's compiled for Pi, because you're in development, this will be set to 1, which means this will be included. If it's for distribution, the Unreal will set this to 0, and it will strip this out. And if it's stripping it out here, and these are virtual overrides, it's going to strip it upstream. It's going to strip it here. So we want it all stripped out as well. And so we also need to do that in the implementation too. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this post edit change property, but we're also going to create this on settings change, which is a delegate, which will allow us to hook into. And so when anything on changes, you can do a broadcast here if you need to be, which will then broadcast out to anything that's maybe listening. And again, this is purely for editor purposes only. So now that we've got those in there, we also need to add them into the implementation. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up for our delegate. So we have a delegate again down here. This is a static delegate on update settings, right? Settings change, and so this is the multicast parameter 2. So it's doing a multicast delegate, 2 parameters on update settings, developer settings. So this is the object that's coming in. So this object needs to be this guy. So just make sure that the settings is that guy. So this is us. This is a pointer back to us, and then this is actually a kind of like an enumerator, or actually it's a little bit more than an enumerator. It's actually a bit shift. So if I go to definition real quick, so this is actually the property types changes, and these are all of the types. And as you can see here, we've got this little. It's really not. It's not an enumerator. It's really a type 32 of type 32, and all it's doing is it's based on the specifier here. It's doing a bit shift. So depending on what you're doing, this is a bit shift of 0, bit shift of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 10. So it's just shifting it. So it's considered a flag within the editor. So, and that's under Unreal Engine types. So that's a flag. So we can set the flag based on the change type. And then we've got the settings here, which is our class, which actually has the settings, and this is the name of the delegate. And I'm just going to call it on settings change, and we're good to go. And then here we need to then go ahead and create an instance of that variable. So here, this is the developer settings class. There it is, and then that's the developer settings on settings change. So, and again, we've wrapped this but with the editor, because this is set. So there's 2 types. There's with editor, and then there's with editor only data. So if it's a data variable, like a property, so you could actually have some of these properties which are editor specific. You can go ahead and wrap them with this editor only data, right? Since this is a static, this is a, this is for all intents and purposes a struct. Right, so this is considered data as not functionality, where any functions you would want with editor. So you can make that specify, you can specify that, and again, Unreal Engine will, and then here, this is actually a piece of functional code which is executing. So with editor, that's why we have that there. And again, we're saying that if this is for distribution, we don't want these additional things added. So we have that. Then let's go back to settings real quick. Init post-processing. So I'm just going to grab this. I'm not really going to do anything with this, but if you needed any initialized post-processing of the properties, so this is kind of like pre-processing, and then there's post-processing. You could do something here. Again, this is just an override, and since it's overridden, we also need to make sure we call the super as well. Now this function, like I said, it's sitting outside of the editor, so we can just leave it. And then we have this post edit change property. So this is executed anytime you make a change to any of these properties. So if there's something that needs to happen, so this could be useful if you needed to, say I had a selector here, and if I selected something in that selector, it could change the static mesh, or it could actually change a class here. That's how you could then get it to change through the post edit change property here. So we go to definition. Actually, we're not going to do that. Since it's an override class, I'm just going to go ahead and bring it in. And I'm going to also make sure I bring it in with the editor here. So again, because this is only used with the editor, again, we need to just make sure that if editor and then end if with editor. All right, and then as you can see here, this will run whenever, so anytime we change anything here, it will broadcast on this delegate, and if anything's listening to this delegate, it will then go ahead and update that, or tell it to update that settings for us. So post edit change, and then the broadcast on that delegate. All right, so I think that will do it for our settings here. So we've created a default demo here, and I've gone ahead and created our settings class. So next what we'll do is we'll go ahead and create, I'm going to create a actor component, but the same process should work for both if you wanted to put it straight into the class or not. It's up to you on how you want to do it. But so next up, we'll figure out how we can get these variables, some of these variables out, so that we can use them within our code. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and just reuse this demo pawn class here, since all I want to do is I just want to demonstrate how you can get this data out. It's all pretty much the same. Once you've done it for one, you can do it for everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a function, which is a string function. I'm just going to focus on the variables, since working with meshes and stuff can be a little bit more exciting. But within demo pawn, get variable string, I'm just going to go ahead and show potential fixes. So I'm just going to close this, and we can close this. So now that we're working with a settings class, we just need to, first off, let's go ahead and do our quick include, so we can say which settings class we want to interact with. All right, so there's our settings class include. So we need to make sure we include that. And then all we really need to do is call this get defaults of type settings, which is only really one class, which is our settings class. And it will then pull that back into this runtime settings variable. And we're just going to make sure it's a constant. All right, so we're going to create this constant so we can't change it. And then this is going to be our developer settings. And that's really it, if you want to be able to call it. And then for our little demo, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to play with the string, and we'll get the variable config label, turn that to string, and we'll get the Boolean. If you want to play with the variables, you can as well. But all we need to do is, once we've got the runtime settings, then all we have to do is we can then call the public functions, which again we defined. So here, depending on this is toggled, we'll say toggled on, toggled off, and then I'm just going to go ahead and say get the label, which is considered a F name, and we'll convert that to string. So this is just an F string message, and I'm just using the append function on the F string. So we'll just append which one of these states the toggle is in, and then we'll append any change to the label, or whatever that label's changed to, and we'll just output that there. All right, so now that we've got this, we'll just go ahead and compile this, and then once it's compiled, we'll move over to the blueprints, and we can then go ahead and test this out and kind of see how that works out. Okay, so first off, after you've done a compile, if you come into the projects and you don't see your thing here, you may just need to close the solution and reopen it. Again, this is global. So again, compile it. If you don't see it, just close the solution, reopen it, and you should see it. And then if we click on configuration, we have our values with our defaults. So if I change this, I'm going to say toggle on. Demo test label. All right, so we make a couple changes there. Also, if you close it and you come back into project settings and come back, and you can see the data will stick. Here's our blueprints. If we want to change it to our demo pawn, we can, or we can change it back to the blueprints. You can do that. All right, next is going to be, all right, so now let's go ahead and create a little test blueprint. So we have our demo pawn here. We're just going to open this up. For this demo, I'm just going to go ahead and just put a spring arm and a camera. Nothing special there. And then on tick, let's go see if we can find that function. What was that function's name? Just gonna bring up. Whatever that was called. So we'll just let's see. All right, so let's go find our function. There it is. And we're just going to go ahead and print this out on tick. I'm going to set this to a duration of 0 so it doesn't go crazy, and I'm just going to park that in there. Compile. Just going to move this off screen real quick. Let's find a place for this ball. And I'm just going to go ahead for now and just set that to player 0. So if I fire this up, oh, looks like I've got the need to change this back real quick. So I'm going to hit. So what I'm just setting this to player numbers and standalone. Hit save, and that should set it. And as you can see there, toggle on demo. So toggles on, test label. So if I come back and go to project settings, and I come down to, and we toggle that, and 33, close it, and then run it again. As you can see, toggle off, test label, and 33. So data's coming back. So that's kind of how you can set that up. And like I said, you should be able to do the same things if you need to bring in specific mesh or material or textures or whatever you need to bring in, and you set it as defaults, or even assets like blueprints, or you can kind of do the same thing. All right, so that should do it for this introductory primer. on developer settings. If you like what I do, feel free to like and share my videos, as well as subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Cheers and have a great day.